Good evening, everyone. Greetings. I am Greg Stanton of Catalyst Coaching and Consulting. Welcome to this year's Ignite Your Soul Connections dealing with spiritual leadership. This is day one, December 16th, 2013. I'm rather excited because we're right at the fourth year. It started in December 2011 with the Ascension. We had 15 nights there. In 2012, we had relationships in the age of Aquarius. That was 5 nights with 5 power-packed topics. Then we went into this June. We had, June of 2012, that is, we had Raising New Earth Children. That was a 5-night, 5 topics. We had a great time there. Then now we're at 2013, and we're dealing tonight with spiritual leadership. Before we get started, let's acknowledge Master Force Incorporated for consistently working to keep us abreast of what's needed in our communities and to extend our capacity both to love and to grow spiritually on a regular basis. We want to commend Master Force for the work they're doing there. You can also follow us tonight on Facebook via Ignite Your Soul Connection. That's go to Facebook via Ignite Your Soul Connection. While you're there, feel free to post questions and comments as you listen throughout the night, the time that we'll have together. This is truly an exciting time as we bring this year to a close. Tonight we're talking about spiritual leadership inside of our responsibility to the community, and we're pleased to welcome Nicoh David to this forum tonight, who is, by the way, currently bringing to light the power of action when it comes to making a difference amongst our youth. So let me segue us into this conversation with Nicoh. To give you a little bit of his background, his bio, to kick this conversation off. Nicoh brings over 12 years of experience in marketing, sales, and strategic media business development to the Metropolitan Board. He's an alumni of Georgia State University with a double major in biology and pre-med and marketing. Nicholas has utilized his knowledge to found his own media development firm, NCW Consulting. Shortly after he finished at Georgia State, he went on to work with several top organizations and municipalities such as Bank of America, City of Atlanta, and Allstate Insurance. He has also been involved with several youth leadership councils based in Chicago and Atlanta. He is an active supporter of the Atlanta public school system and Chicago public school systems, respectively. He's been invited to share key insights with today's youth as society shifts to a more technologically based society. He is currently developing a digital initiative whose purpose is to address the gap that is arising when developing a new type of social engagement with today's themes. Nicholas brings to the Metropolitan Board of Chicago Urban League a strategic forward-thinking process that looks to answer the needs more effectively amongst our community. His approach to client needs involves innovative thinking and proper structure. In addition to that, Nicholas is also has a Cycle of Peace, which you can go to on Facebook, and you can find the fan page there, the Cycle of Peace, and we're going to talk about that tonight inside this conversation where he's raising awareness of the issues of youth violence, obesity, and critical thinking. So let's sit back and prepare ourselves for an exciting conversation tonight inside of this particular topic where we're dealing with today spiritual leadership in the community. Good evening, Nicoh. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Greg. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so you're a pretty busy guy. It's kind of hard to catch up with. Where you been lately?
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm rubbing it in, but I just came from 80-degree weather. I had the privilege of being able to go down to Miami and visit with the school systems down there. And actually, I'm planning the next trek for the Cycle of Peace, actually. So I was spent the last 4 days in the Everglades playing with alligators and looking at all kinds of creatures that don't live here right now.
Okay. As we get into this tonight, can you kind of give us a little bit about the Cycle of Peace and your recent trip and what you're trying to do with that?
Sure, absolutely. Well, the Cycle of Peace came about, how did it get started? I guess just working here in the city of Chicago and the community, and you know, in Inglewood and you know, Lawndale communities, and really getting boots on the ground out there and seeing what was going on with between our youth, and you know, where some of their you know, violence or you know, the victims were coming from, you know, and I just, you know, I kind of got fed up with being fed up, and I was seeking a way to express myself and also bring attention and awareness to, you know, what was going on, you know, in this so-called civilized society. So I said, what can I do? I'm an avid cyclist. I ride almost every day. It's a way that I meditate. And I said, you know, how can I, you know, raise awareness around, you know, these critical issues of youth violence, you know, critical thinking, because a lot of times if people just stop and, you know, take the time to think about what was going on, it could prevent a lot of chaos. And then the obesity issue is, you know, it seems like our youth are, you know, instead of growing taller, they're growing wider. So all that kind of culminated for me in the form of a long-distance cycle. And I was actually inspired by two gentlemen I met in Los Angeles 2 years ago who are cycling around the world right now. And, you know, when I saw them and they shared their story with me, it planted a seed. And that seed wound up growing out in the form of the cycle of peace to raise awareness for those three key issues.
Excellent. With the cycle of peace, can the community get involved in any way as far as donating and supporting this cause? And how, if so, how?
Absolutely. We do have an Indiegogo campaign set up. You can find keyword the cycle of peace under Indiegogo.com. You know, all contributions are appreciated. We are attempting to raise resources for the students of Gary Comer. They have a summer trip coming up to the Mediterranean, and you know, not all the students are able to afford the trip. So I said, you know, let's put together a fundraising initiative and try to help some of the students who've earned their way, who might not have all the resources, get over and you know, be able to, you know, celebrate their graduations, you know, in a global fashion, you know. And so that's the nature of the fundraising. But even after that trip is complete, we do seek to be able to assist other students at the school with any other auxiliary needs they might have.
Okay. I know that trip was right at 750 miles. Did you ride it alone, and do you normally do most of your trips alone, or as you cross the country, can people join in with you?
You know, this particular trip was a solo ride. The reason is I wanted to make sure I could do it. And as you know, when the Spirit tells you to move, you just move. So I really wasn't interested in spending a lot of energy in trying to rally people up and getting people or convincing anyone. You know, I believe eagles fly alone, and you know, the vision was given, and so I had to move on it, and I had faith that God would carry me through. Now, if anybody is interested in joining the next treks, I am more than happy to take on anybody who would like to, you know, ride with me. Again, in 2014, the goal is to ride a total of 10,000 miles. So that's gonna play out in a few different ways, I'm sure. But the easiest way would be to do 10 1,000-mile treks. So I will be planning the next ride from Atlanta to Miami at the top of the year, in January, actually, to begin the year off, and we'll go from there. But I'm always open to anybody who's interested in riding. You could be novice or advanced. That's okay. But yes, I am.
Okay. We posted that to the Ignite Your Soul Connection Facebook page as a link out there, so we'll be following you in that. You've segued us right into this. You mentioned when the Spirit says move, it's time to move. So we want to start the conversation just talking about what is spiritual leadership. Most of us have come to appreciate the saying, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. However, it seems as though many of us have no idea what this truly means, nor do we how does it play out in our lives. So let's get the conversation going around when you mentioned that, when the Spirit says move, how is spirituality playing into the role of what the clarion call that you received?
I'm sorry, the last part you said with as far as the planning is concerned with the trip?
Yeah. So, no, as far as this call that you have to action, you mentioned when the Spirit says move, how does that play out in your life when you say it's time to go? What does that look like for you, and has that always been a motivator? Because I looked into your bio, you've been on the vanguard, cutting edge on some things, and how does that play into your life?
That's what leads me. That's what guides me. I think if we don't tap into our spirits, then we're going to be lost anyway, right? So I definitely spend a lot of my time engaged within community action, but also meditating and spending time to reflect and seek God and ask Him what my next steps are. I find that everything that I do or I try to initiate under my own will always comes up short, or is horribly messed up. So I've learned how to acquiesce and try to do the best I can to follow God's cues as He would lead my life.
Yeah, when we talk about spirituality, I'm amazed at the number of young people who are living out spirituality, but they're not living out in the traditional means that, like many of the individuals that within my age group grew up. So when we talk about spirituality as a community, what is our current breakdown as you're out there interacting with the youth? How is spirituality playing out amongst our young generation?
I find it to be actually an increasing foreign concept. Most people relate to spirituality through the form of a religious context as far as denomination and what have you, but a lot of them, surprisingly, they know about their souls, but they haven't been given proper training in what that means. What is your spirit? What is it? How do you relate to your spirit? Everybody's taught about God and having faith, but there are some mechanisms that I feel that our youth need to be trained in more aggressively, as far as how to even work within one's own spirit. So
can you share
I find. Excuse me, one more time.
Okay, some of those mechanisms. Can you kind of touch on them?
Sure, absolutely. Breathing, for example. It's funny. The deeper we go, the more simple it becomes. But basic breath control, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. For example, when I was traveling and I was approaching mountains, I literally had to ride up almost 8 miles at about an 8% incline. It was a mountain called Mount Eagle. It's the highest elevation point between Chicago and Atlanta. And the technique that got me through that was prayer and breathing in and breathing out the right way. But proper breath control gives you access to your spirit in a different way. It calms everything down. It slows everything down. It allows you to have more control over the situation that might be in front of you that could be potentially challenging. And it allows you to approach it differently. It takes the ego out of the way and allows more of your spirit to come up. Another example is specific prayer. These are realms of the spirit. If you want a certain outcome, you have to plant a certain seed. This is the same concept of planting a tree. You can't plant an orange seed and expect an apple tree to grow. It's the same thing that goes along with prayer and one's faith. If you don't know how to properly go within yourself and plant the right seed of the spirit, then you won't bear the right fruit of the spirit. And I think that should be really discussed on a very micro level. Right now, I feel like it's really discussed at a macro level, a very general level, but I think it really should be drilled down into a little bit more.
Right. When we talk about breathing and prayer, which are two essential, when you look at Western religion, many times breathing is not really an essential part of our meditation process. But when you look at the more of the Eastern, breathing is essential. It's a way of bringing you inside. So that's really key. And when you mention prayer, now when you have a generation that don't necessarily have a prayer book, meaning not that familiar with the Bible, I'm finding as I speak to young people, they know a lot about affirmations and making intentions. Are you seeing that play out in any way when you talk about one of the pillars that they may be involved in?
Absolutely. I mean, I see a lot of African principles. I see Indian, Native American principles, Asian principles. I really feel like it's these techniques and these principles we discuss are global anyway.
Right.
I feel it's a very American concept to isolate and put specific racial constructs on techniques. I think there should be a more of a porous acceptance of all cultures and all global traditions, because each of them have their own specific value and benefit. And so I really feel like there should be even more acceptance of all global traditions as it relates to spiritual cultivation techniques.
How are you introducing that to the young people as you work with them within? Are you finding a door in the educational institutions when you come in more from a spiritual place versus a religious construct?
Well, part of it is this: when we're engaging in the educational realm, and when we're working with the students, a lot of it has to do with practical application. So a lot of it is making it relate to what they experience every day anyway, and then beginning the introduction of these concepts. For example, I work with a program called Iman. Iman is Inner City Muslim Action Network, and they're doing great work in Inglewood. But that is naturally, obviously, organically based on religious construct and spiritual construct. So in that environment, it's a lot easier to speak about these things and have an audience that is already pretty much assimilated. When you're going into a public school environment, well, that's something where obviously church and state is obviously been, specifically divided. So you have to approach it from a different perspective. Obviously, we are all spiritual beings anyway, so I think there is just a universal language that you can speak that awakens that portion of people anyway. And I think that's where that particular technique comes into play, is understanding the proper language to speak, where you don't bring any offense to any other belief system, but you speak directly to the soul of the person. And I feel that you can speak to the soul of a person when you're being real anyway. You see what I'm saying? You don't have to preface it by saying I'm about to have a spiritual conversation when you're coming as real as possible. You know what I mean? And the youth respond to that. They know when somebody is being honest with them. They know when somebody isn't sugarcoating and they're presenting the facts as they really are, and that somebody's being honest about opening their eyes to the reality of the world that they're living in and the type of attacks that they're under. And that's how I preface it. I preface it in that manner.
When we talk about our community, what role, or do you believe that the community have a responsibility in how we address our spiritual needs as a whole?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. The community at large is the word itself denotates that. Community is about unity in the first place, and each one of us is connected. If we acquiesce that responsibility of connection, of responsibility to one another, then we don't have a community in the first place. You see what I'm saying? It takes a whole circle. It takes each person to play their part in order for a community to even exist. And so when people won't even step into that circle, then what community is it? And I feel like, in today's era, you get a lot of energy redirected to the material, and acquisition of things. But at the same time, you have a lot of forgetting about one another.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean at a deep level, at a real level. I don't mean just going to an event and bringing a toy to drop off in a box. I mean, really calling and checking up on people. If you see an older lady crossing the street, would you turn around and make sure she gets across the street safely if she's walking with her cane? If you see a lady getting off of the bus and she look like she might have an issue at that last little ledge, would you grab her arm and make sure that she's able to step down safely without the bus having to drop down? You see what I'm saying? So it's a matter of those little things, and that's the responsibility of community. If there are men standing, let's say, on the sidewalk waiting for a taxi cab or a bus, and a child hits his grandmother, would anybody speak up and say, "Hey, little boy, you're not supposed to put your hands on your grandmother like that"? I know I had to, and when I spoke up about it, everybody became silent and looked at me as if I'd done something that was a rarity. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
Everybody became silent, and I say that should not be an exception. That should be the norm.
Correct. We got, I see we have quite a few people on the call this evening. I just want to remind everyone that this is an interactive call, and all you have to do is press 1 on your keypad, and that will give you the option where you can get in on a question. So we're going to ask that you all become more participatory in this process. This is not an interview. This is a conversation. So when we talk about the community and its responsibility, and how, in what ways are you seeing different communities address the spiritual needs of the entire community? As you cross the country, are you seeing anything that's different or something that's standing out?
You know what? Honestly, unfortunately, I can't say I'm saying anything that's groundbreaking yet.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that it's not on the immediate horizon. I say that we are in a paradigm shift. I say that there is a transition of leadership that's occurring. And with that transition, just the same way as a president or a presidential cabinet transitions office, that's the same way we are transitioning as a community and as a society. So I say that there's space and opportunity for new initiatives to be planted, in this fertile soil, and for it to be cultivated. I know myself and several other leaders in Atlanta, the leaders I recently met with in Miami. We have colleagues in New York and LA who are all thinking the same way right now. And everyone is asking, like, what's next? So one of the things I'm actively doing to help create, some more consolidation is teaching our youth social media responsibility. That's one of the things that I teach in the schools and in the community organizations that I work with. I teach social media responsibility, how to dissect advertising campaigns that are coming at our youth, how to read between the lines on media, what celebrityism is really all about, and most importantly, what it's doing to their souls. You see what I'm saying? So I directly approach this. If I say if the enemy is blatantly putting information out there in front of our youth to rob them of their innocence, well, they need to be equipped with the proper weaponry to be able to guard themselves against it. They need to be girded in the armor to protect themselves. So the same way they're getting exposed to all this lascivious information and all of this nonsense is the same way they need to be equipped with an antidote. And so that's one of the mechanisms that we're teaching right now. From 6th grade up until actually I'm working with several colleges as well. I work with Clark Atlanta in Atlanta, and hopefully work with Columbia here. But bringing programs like that online is one of the ways. Working within the constructs of the systems that are in place right now that our youth have access to be able to start infiltrating and flooding with solution-based information.
Right. Okay. So when we talk about the community having a responsibility to the spiritual needs of our children, when we look at what's going on, not just in Chicago, but across the country with the onset of violence, even the recent shootings that we're having in Colorado, when we talk about the piece of spirituality, what seems to be missing is at one time America was a community of faith, and that could be you had the Protestant, the Catholic Church, you had the mosque or other communities of faith, but now there appears to be a falling away. And so with that being said, how do we equip or what role do you see the church or the traditional religious institutions playing to address the chaos that is going on in our communities?
I think we should just go. I don't think we have any further to look than the history books. You know, when we were fighting civil rights, when we were fighting to be free from slavery, what roles did those institutions play? And I believe that's where we have to go back to. You know, in order to understand where you can go in the future or where you might need to go, you have to definitely understand the past. And I think there has been several things actually. There's been a cutting off of our knowledge or connectivity to our wisdom. So there is a huge amount of wisdom that is not being passed on to today's current leaders. I think there's also that dynamic of everybody wants to be 20 years old, and that's just not right. I think our elders and those who have experienced feel comfortable interacting with those who have the realm or who have the helm now, and there should be a better transfer of information, of wisdom, between those who fought the fight before and those who are currently getting ready or currently engaged in the fight today. And our fight today is for our youth, for our very community, for our very foundation as a people. You know what I mean? Because as much advance that we've had since the civil rights, I feel like we've actually devolved. You know, at least during the civil rights era, there was a whole community. I'm sure I could ride through the South Side and see a lot of the businesses that are boarded up now that were still thriving and vibrant. So I think you know, when you look at, you know, the religious structures of today, they all have merit. They all have purpose. I think there needs to be a consolidated message still. I think in the past there was a consolidated message. There was, regardless of Protestant, Catholicism, Lutheran, Baptist, everybody knew that we have got to get free and we've got to make sure that nobody dies in these streets. And I think there needs to be that same level of unity, and not only just unity in word, but unity in action. I think Chicago has as many churches per capita per square mile as any other major city, if not more. You know, when you include storefront locations and what have you, of any other major city across the country. And I think it's just an atrocity that we have that many religious institutions, yet the murder rate remains so consistent.
Yeah, and so my concern with that, my background, I've pastored for 25 years, and my observation is with all these churches, evidently something's not happening. There's no application, evidently, to the premises that should be being promoted with inside. Now, I have an observation that it appears that the churches appear to be more internal focused versus external focused. When you look at the civil rights, the church was there, and I'm speaking from the perspective of the Protestant church, but when you look at all the communities of faith, the Catholic churches, the Jewish mosques, the Jewish temples, they were on the street. They were out involved. I'm not seeing that today. How do you think that plays in this conversation?
I mean, I think it plays immediately to the forefront of this conversation. I believe that, you know, if you have an institution that you're going to and gaining guidance from, but you don't see them in the field doing the work that they, profess, and Sundays and Wednesdays are good, you know, and the praise team does what they do, and everybody gets excited about it, but you don't see them in your neighborhood actively combating. One church I will say I see a lot of activity around and a lot of action in the community is New Life. New Life does a lot of good stuff in the community. I know they were on 79th at one point, and they had a chain. They held hands up and down 79th to protest the violence that was going on in that area. But it takes more. It takes more of that on an ongoing basis to really impact the bottom line. And the bottom line in this particular scenario is saving more of our youth, opening more eyes. That's what the critical thinking component is about the entire cycle of peace. Is causing people to think, and for them to think that, hey, ignorance isn't okay, you know, and hey, I have a soul too, and okay, I went to church, and now how do I practice this outside of church? You know, hey, I know I'm a sinner, I know I'm going to fall short, but that doesn't mean I can't stop trying. That's like saying, hey, I failed a test in class, and because I failed that test, I'm never going back to school again. Who would do something like that? You know? Right. And so I think, you know, when you're talking about spiritual development and when you're talking about the religious institutions, you got to also hold the people who sit in those pews accountable as well. You cannot go to church and expect your salvation to come just from listening to someone. If you don't put those things in action, everybody knows it's a very popular and very powerful phrase, faith without works is dead.
Right.
And that culminates, I think that, excuse me.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I think that culminates or brings all of this to reality is that faith without works is dead. And I think we are in a culture and a society where everybody wants to have their work done remote controlly or through their smartphones. Right. But at the end of the day, if you don't have boots on the ground, if you don't have your heart pumping and your hands around something that's helping move the needle forward to help move the lever, then you are not working. A smartphone application doesn't count. You get what I'm saying? Right. That's why I needed to ride that far, because I had to show my level of dedication, the level of faith that I had, and the lengths I will go to try to change my immediate environment, because I refuse to be in an environment where I feel uncomfortable, where I feel unsafe. As a man. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You mentioned faith without works is dead, and I think we've taken that to a whole new level in that the work is for the dollar, and the dollar is to put another piece of clothing on my back or perhaps to purchase a new car. So what do you see the role of the distraction that money is bringing when we talk about our churches and what they should be doing at this time?
Well, how can something that comes from us be a distraction? It's the whole concept of, man, my arm is distracting me. How can it distract me? It's a tool. It's meant to help me. I think it's been the whole society has been spent, or a lot of energy has been spent on misdirection. Old Lauryn Hill talked about miseducation. And look what happened to her. You know, when you get to talking and being real about things, especially if you have influence over that many people, then they're gonna censor you. But that's what happens, though. There's been a redirect of our energy into thinking that the thing that we are trying to acquire is from somewhere else other than us, and the money is our own energy. So therefore, people are not at peace with them. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're hitting it. You're on the head with that.
Yeah, I mean the resources that let's just take a look at the whole stock market. It's psychologically based. Prices fluctuate based on people's emotional response to news media release on where something is at. Look at Twitter and Google. These are all intangible objects that function on the stock market as if they actually produce product. And those systems are all based on human response and reaction and understanding how people feel. So if nothing else can show you that your money is based on how you feel and how you think, just look at the example of Google, of Twitter, of Instagram. All of these are mechanisms that track and gauge you, and these companies are making money based on how you react to that. I mean, that's
Right.
the most simple way I could sum that up.
Yeah,
so I don't honor it at all.
This week, we're going to talk about spirituality and business and looking at how that is all playing into it. When we talk about the connection of the action, the work we're putting forward, how are we connecting that to spirit? Like when I hear you say it earlier at the onset of this conversation, you moved because the spirit said move. You got on your bike and you began the process versus the inactivity that could have resulted in trying to mobilize a group to do it with you. So do you see that going on within the community amongst other individuals who don't have the critical mass yet, but they've started that process?
Yeah, I do, and the thing is, I'm really blessed to be connected to a lot of highly influential individuals who are ready to activate and who can create critical mass with a push of a button. One thing I will say, just to take a step back real quick, Greg, is that when amongst our community, and I say our community, I mean specifically the African American, Afro-Latino community, as you know, I have Hispanic blood in me as well. What I've noticed is that there is, instead of a rally around these type of issues, there's almost a scoffing at it. For example, when I first said what I was going to do, everybody was like Forrest Gump, ha ha ha, and I was laughing about it, and I said, wow, that's funny to you, huh? What happens when somebody in your family is a victim of violence? Will it be so funny then?
Where you think
see what
that's
I'm saying?
From? Yeah.
I think that cynicism, that joking manner about things that are just so serious. We're in a state of genocide right now. I think it's that breakdown of community. I think it's a lack of understanding that we are spiritual beings first. I think it's a basic fundamental breakdown in that understanding, which goes back to critical thinking. People are so oblivious to the fact that, hey, my spirit is connected to the person to my left. Get what I'm saying? If I bless that
oneness
person,
of being, right?
Exactly. I think there is such, and it has been by design, that there's been a fundamental breakdown in people's realization that we are all connected, that our spirits have power, that it's more than just reading about somebody else that did miraculous things, that if we believe and we cultivate ourselves, that we will have access to these same things. It's even written that all the great prophets said there will be those who come after me that will do greater things. And I think it's a shame in the information age, the so-called information age, that people have acquiesced all their gifts and all their powers to things that were created by man. You see what I'm saying? They've effectively become sheep. They've effectively become cattle. I got more positive feedback and support from Caucasians, from Asians, from every other race besides the people who I was riding for. And all that did was that became fuel.
Right. Where's the distraction? Where is the distraction coming from amongst our community?
Ourselves, our need to swag out. The system specific design to build heroes and icons that have nothing to say of relevance. The only thing they speak on is materialism, material gain, and how much more they have, which is actually all coming from the people who idolize them. Wow. That system is being supported, celebrated, and pushed down everybody's throat on a consistent basis. And our people of today's era are not spending time amongst each other speaking about it in an honest way. We've become economic slaves. You're looking at the city right.
Swag out. Right. When you mentioned swag out, can you speak on what you meant by that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Swag out is, I'd rather be fresh. I'd rather have all the flyest Nikes. I'd rather buy the same pair of Jordans that just got released 3 times in the past 3 months. The same Nikes, same Jordans that I've never seen Jordan go through any neighborhood in the city and speak about any of the violence and any babies getting shot. But these silly thugs go and spend hundreds of dollars on his shoes to fund his lifestyle. I've never seen Nike really take on outside of a basketball camp and let the kids pick up another basketball and shoot basketballs around. But I haven't seen them ever take any of these same kids into their executive offices and show them how they actually design a Nikes Why they sit down and come up with marketing strategies to market to the same people that buy the same shoes every month. All they do is switch a color out, and then you get the same line of people standing in line and talking about how cool they are for buying $200 pairs of shoes for a man who's never come and given back to their community at all. His whole career has been built off the back of kids selling drugs to try to be able to buy his shoes. And that's okay? Those are our heroes?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what is this?
What is our commitment?
Sorry.
At the community? No, at the community level, because you're right on. At the community level, what is our commitment? What's the call to action? What's some of the solution steps that you see? Action steps towards these solutions.
For the PTA to really mean something again. For the PTA to really mean something. For instead of a parent coming up to the school fussing at a teacher for disciplining their child, and a parent coming up saying, "Why are you screaming at my child?" Sit down with the teacher and say, "You're right, Johnny. You shouldn't have done that." Let's start really reforming the bonds of what a community is. It's bridge building. It's a collective group of people. It's the same thing that happened over in Egypt. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to get you guys caught up in any drama, but that Arab Spring uprising showed exactly what happens when a group of people get sick and tired and fed up with some nonsense, of dictatorship. You know what? Let me tell you this. I was riding through the country. I got more love in parts of the country that people would consider probably the most racist parts of the country. I was talking to card-carrying members, and they were like, "Man, nothing but respect." Because, you know, when I rode, I was riding in 20-degree weather, brother. I had a cold front that came over me right when the tornadoes hit. So I was riding in 20-degree weather the whole time. That was another thing. When I was riding, I had no problems because everybody else couldn't deal with the environment. And what I learned from that, I learned that in order to truly succeed, you got to go where nobody else is willing to go. When everybody else falls away, that's when I need to come to life. And we need more people who talk or think like that. There's too many people out here constantly complaining about the snow when you know you live in Chicago and it's wintertime. Would you quit talking to me about cliche things? Let's elevate. Let's talk about next level. Let's talk about you as a parent not giving your child the money or enabling your child to act like a spoiled brat and hold them accountable and be responsible. Instead of just giving them blanket money because you feel guilty as a parent, have standards. Say, hey, you got to do some community service work if you want to get this money. If you want your allowance, or if you want those Jordans, you need to volunteer 5 hours at a homeless shelter. I take my 8-year-old son every time I go to Atlanta for the Hosea Feed the Williams. My son is with me. When I go back down to Atlanta this weekend, he'll be with me at the Fulton County Toy Drive. See, it's about accountability. I'm sorry, excuse me. That's what I would say. I would say we would take a collective rise amongst the parents because these kids who are out here committing these atrocities and killing each other, they have parents. They didn't just come from the sky. A stork didn't just drop them on somebody's doorstep. They're somebody's son, daughter, niece, nephew, granddaughter, grandfather. You see what I'm saying, grandson? And there is somebody in the community that's enabling that type of nonsense to go on. I think we need to cut that out of our community as if it was a cancer, disassociate with it, isolate it, and treat it like a disease, because it is a social disease. And what unfortunately happens is that social disease spreads throughout the entire community. The entire community winds up being held accountable for the ignorance of somebody in the hood, because as you know, we all look alike. So if you wear a 3-piece suit or you wear your pants sagging to the ground, you still have to prove yourself. You see what I'm saying? So I think collectively as a group, we've got to hold each other accountable. First and foremost, this isn't going to. The salvation is not going to come from anywhere other than ourselves. And our men have got to stand up. Our men have to start acting like men. I see too many men huddle up, acting like women. There needs to be a clear understanding of what a man is and what a man's responsibilities are and what a woman's responsibilities are. Now, I'm not speaking as far as earning money and working and all of that. I'm talking about as it relates to the family construct within our community specifically. Just because you and the mother of yours, I'm sorry, excuse me.
No, go ahead. How do you define community in terms of this conversation we're having right now? Can we get down to defining community outside of organizations?
Yes. Yes, community is mother, father, brother, sister, grandmother, grandfather, abuela, tia, auntie, godmother, big mama. It's the family, brother. It's a family reunion that has to occur. Community is not some big thing that's far off and in the sky somewhere. Our community is our family. When we sit around a dinner table and talk, when we see a sister who's coming to the door, you know how many brothers I see just open the door and just walk in ahead of them?
Right.
And the sister don't say anything.
Or letting them in, right.
Yeah, exactly. I'm talking about chivalry. I'm talking about the basic premise or concept of thinking about someone other than yourself first. Putting someone, even for that inkling of a second, putting someone in front of yourself. That's community to me. That's coming into a place of commune. Community is a derivative of the word commune.
Right.
Commune is bringing together.
Right. Right. A common unity. So that's the piece that we need to get it back to. And when we talk about spirituality, how does that play in being the fiber that runs throughout the entire community?
That's all it is. That's the only thing there is running through the community. If it's properly acknowledged. See, if you look at the cycle of peace, for me, it's always been about connecting mind, body, and soul. That's why I did it. That's why I seek. That's why I continue to seek. That's why I'm getting ready for the next ride, so I can have even more of that connection. It's a connection between all those things, mind, body, and soul. And the community is a body, right? We're all individuals the same way. If you look at your body, while it might appear whole, is made up of over trillions of different cells, all functioning to make one body. Well, that's how we have to look at our community, in the same aspect. Each person represents an aspect of the whole body. We cannot look at ourselves as any different from the next person. I've been guilty of it. I've been on a train. I've been in general public, and have wanted to disassociate myself with someone who was around me that was ignorant.
Right.
So what I did, instead of just go ahead.
In the physical body, I think that's a great analogy. It's a common unity. What happens when the liver wants to do its own thing outside of the system in which it was designed to operate? Normally, what it does, it breaks down and it dies, and eventually affects the entire body. So within our community, can we identify some of those participants in our community that are not doing what they should do? I think you did, like you said, the men need to come forward as the protectors of the community. What roles do you see the mothers playing? Not just wives, but mothers and grandmothers.
Sure. I see mothers and wives obviously as the nurturers. They're strong in the earth, of our community. I think the women of our community are strong, sometimes too strong. I think sometimes they can be a bit over-dominating in a fear aspect. And a lot of this stuff goes back into antiquity. That's where you have to understand and study the lessons. That's where you get into the slave mentality of oh, Lord, we got to protect our babies because if not, they're going to get killed. So that ideology is continued on. Now, the structure has changed, but the effect is the same. You got incarceration going on. You got, babies being killed in the street. So you still have a fear mechanism that's being taught. And what's not being discussed here is this, is what happens when a group of people keep having the same conversation? A group of people keep saying the same thing. What happens is it creates it. Correct. So when you have a group of people who keep speaking on cliches, keep speaking on fear, keep speaking on lack, that's all that's what you'll create.
And that's part of our spiritual conversation. Right.
Exactly.
When we talk about spirituality, it talks about the ability to we are reinforcing our communities that we have by we're looking at the reality of what we see versus the possibility that we can create. And I think that's what spirituality does within the community. Just to think about it, when we look back at what happened amongst that young group of people, what was called the Black Panther Party. when you look at how old they were and how they changed a nation. And I think that has not been spoken into the lives of this current generation. It's all about the dance. It's about the music. It's about those things that sedate the pain that they're experiencing. So I think you're right on with this conversation where we are right now. We need to learn how to create as true spiritual beings. I know we often say that we're not human beings having a spiritual experience, but we really are spirit beings having a human experience. And we need to top our human experience off with the excellence of knowing that we are co-creators with our Creator. Great. So when we talk about defining, go back to we're defining our community as the people of our community, not the organizations. It's the organisms that create the organization. And we are spiritual beings at our core. And I think once we get back to that, I think my observation is we've mixed them as religion and spirituality as one and the same. And now there's a new construct coming forward where people are able to experience their Creator and express spirituality without having to be totally engaged with what has been. That's why I'm seeing this younger crowd. They are really expressing themselves. I'm amazed at the number of young people I see reading books by like a Gary Zukov, talking about the heart and soul, or reading Spiritual Partnership. I was on the bus recently, and a 15-year-old kid was reading this book, and I was amazed that he had gotten hold of it. He said he just so happened to be in a bookstore, and it like jumped out at him. So I think there's something going on that is going to get our children to the next level. Great.
Absolutely. Right. I believe that's what this conversation is doing, though. I believe that's what it's about, isn't it? I think it's opening that dialogue.
Okay.
I think that's what it takes. But it also takes, being in the classrooms, mentoring, identifying 4 kids maybe in your neighborhood who you need to take to a museum once a week. I was a product of mentorship. I was a product of Future Business Leaders of America. I was a product of volunteerism. I was a product of people who saw something in me and taking me to the museums and things. You know what I mean? I was raised by a village. I think parents need to be completely honest with their children about who they're watching on TV, and that a lot of that stuff is make-believe, that your heroes do not bounce a basketball, they do not throw a football, they do not kick a soccer ball. Your heroes are the ones who sacrifice every day to make sure that you have what you need. Get what I'm saying? Because what's being lifted up as heroism is merely consumerism. Let's not get it twisted. That's the same way as saying Real Housewives of Atlanta or Beverly Hills are Real Housewives. Of course they aren't. You feel me? Because the minute you get into the credits, they start talking about, first thing is the ex-wife of so-and-so, the girlfriend is so-and-so. So let's be unequivocally clear with our youth and with our community and with even our adults. That's, again, why critical thinking is a part of the cycle of peace and why that's part of the platform. I come across so many adults who can't even think themselves out of a wet paper bag. It's kind of scary. But these are people who are functioning in society and have jobs, which means that, basically our system is turning out sheep. Okay, you go do this for X amount of years, you get a degree, you get this amount of money, and because you haven't been trained on how to think cognizantly, and how to really put together things, you have all that money, and you'll turn it right over because you don't even know how to think anyway. You get what I'm saying? Look at what it's. Excuse me.
No, go ahead.
Excuse me. And I was just saying, this is the level of critical thinking that people have got to be faced with. If you look at Santa Claus and turn one letter around, it all of a sudden becomes a Satan Claus. You feel what I'm saying? How many people really understand what etymology is? If you walk up to the average person on the street and say, what does this word really mean? How many people would even know? Ask how many people what their names mean. People walk around here every day putting power in things that they don't truly even understand. And so that's where the part of where their awakening has to occur. Challenge people to even think and study and dig deeper. That your Santa Claus is really a satanic clause. Because all you're doing is putting all your energy into a credit system that it's going to take you a full year to pay off. They even tell you right after Thanksgiving that this is when we make all our money. It's not about giving gifts to people out of the love of your heart. It's to get you to spend all your money on products and services and goods that are going to keep you indebted for another year. It's a Satan clause, and it's Black Friday. Excuse me.
When we talk about critical thinking, the critical thinking as it pertains to some of the work you're doing with the youth, how are you seeing that play out when you pull in the spiritual piece to the commitment to the community?
Oh, it's at the foundation of it all. The thing I love about it is that the youth really pick up on it. The youth pick up on it immediately. And like I said, when you're approaching doing this work, when you keep look at what Jesus did. You know, honestly, I don't want to sound cliche, but what did Jesus do? He didn't walk around. He didn't hop over on a pulpit and give some big verbose speech like the Pharisees did. He went to the river and made an example out of the tree that was growing by the river and how it could apply to everybody's life. I take the same approach to spirituality and community development, man. If you're coming at people and telling them exactly just in a very real way, their souls will naturally vibrate with what you're saying because it's real. Yes, it's like saying, you know, gravity doesn't exist, but I just threw this thing up in there and it came down. I mean, come on, man. That's blatant. Like, come on, gravity does exist. That's the same thing that happens when you begin speaking about the things of the soul and the reality of the current situation. People obviously have to agree with it because it's true. It's just there aren't enough people speaking on the reality of the situation.
So when we look at our current community, when we talk about models of what's working, are you seeing? Can you even talk to that, or are we just starting from scratch totally?
Can you rephrase that question, please?
If we look at when you talk about our current community, and you know it's easy to identify where we're falling apart, but what do we have left that we can build on? What do you see there?
Oh, the brilliant minds of our youth, the creativity, the imagination that they possess, an indomitable spirit, the fact that we come from a people who, regardless of all the situations and things we've gone through, continue to thrive. We've got a black president, you know, in office. I mean, to me, that is a beacon of light, which means that what's happening is the community at large has acquiesced their responsibilities to making sure that this energy continues on, and that people are dropping the mantle, dropping the ball in place of falling into a messianic complex.
Right. And when we look at that, the call to action that our community rallied around to be instrumental in getting the president into the seat, that same energy, is it being mobilized in any way for any common cause today?
You said is the community being rallied around any specific cause today based on the president being in office?
Just how that was a common unity at that time. If you were here in Chicago when he was elected, you see what happened there. There was an energy. It was electric. Where is that energy? Because I don't believe energy always exists. So how is that? How do we pull that together?
It's got to be consistent. Hey, well, you know what? And let's be honest here, Greg. A lot of that energy that was created by the machine as well.
Right.
Let's be real.
Right.
A lot of the soul power, a lot of community power that's out here, is fiat. It's fugazi. The people have forgotten literally how to tap into their own souls because they spend so much time looking at television and playing video games and letting somebody else tell them what they're supposed to do. It's the grassroots effort is a challenging road, but it's a very rewarding road once you figure out how to tap into it. Let's be honest though, the Barack Obama machine was a machine. That's where all that energy came from. He was accepted by the establishment. The establishment signed off on him, and he had unprecedented access to every network, every resource, every social media outlet that existed. So the people merely were branded and marketed to. You know, I can't equate Barack's move to something Malcolm or Martin did, because it wasn't. Barack was accepted. He was placed in position to be able to market and advertise the way he was. So the energy that we saw was created by the system. But it's not an energy that doesn't exist.
Right. That same energy is still there, but it may be just not focused anywhere. When you look at our children or the individuals who don't have institutions that they can go to get information from that's cutting edge, can you make some recommendation of perhaps books or websites that would support this whole concept of the spiritual community?
Wow, man, so many books.
What you reading? Anything in particular?
Well, yeah, actually I am. I'm reading Brainwashed by Tom Burrell. Actually, I'm reading that for a second time. Tom Burrell, I don't know if anybody knows, but he founded Burrell Communications here in Chicago, one of the largest minority ad agencies around, and he wrote a book called Brainwashed that dealt with the advertising effects and what was going on within the African American community. Brilliant book. I would also suggest another book I'm reading, but these are regular readings for me, so it's not like anything new, to be honest. The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra is a good one. And another book, you might have to dig for it, but it's a book on the ancient Egyptian spiritual cultivation. And that deals with how to cultivate one's soul through proper breathing technique. And you might have to go to Frontline Books or, some of the other... you know what, I will try to... Yes, absolutely it is. Netu, exactly.
Excellent. Yes.
And another book I would recommend, very good actually, is The Rise of the Fourth Reich. The Rise of the Fourth Reich by Jim Marrs. It deals with a lot of what the foundation of America is built on. So I would really recommend that as well. The Rise of the Fourth Reich by Jim Marrs. It breaks down Nazi Germany, what's happened, how Nazi Germany transitioned into today's society, and some of the remnants of their ideology, and how it still plays out today. So I think if you're at war, if you're on a battlefield, you got to know what's going on. And I think a lot of people just don't know. So we're in the information age. Google it if you got a question, and do the research that's needed to find out the answers.
Right. We still have quite a few people on the call, but again, I want to remind everyone that this is, in fact, an interactive call. You may have been caught up in the conversation, but I'm asking that you go ahead and press 1 on your dial and then get your question out there to our guest speaker tonight, who has a lot to bring to the table. Really impressed with the work you're doing in that area of Cycle of Peace and amongst our youth. So I think we've chosen the right person tonight to get this conversation started. Now, I do have a question. If I were taking on a spiritual leadership within my community, with my community that is in mind, what should I be most concerned about? Yeah, and that's for the person sitting at home that is saying, okay, I want to make a difference. What should we begin to be most concerned about?
You know what? I don't know. That's a tough question for me because honestly, I don't have any fear. one thing I learned after riding about 800 miles, because I think I did have to double back because in Chattanooga the bridge was out, so I had to actually double back and go like I had to ride about 30, 40 miles east to cross over the river. So I wound up actually doing about 800 miles. But the thing I learned out of that was that you've got to always be in a solution or a problem-solving mindset. Nothing will ever be perfect. And so the biggest thing would be make sure you're prepared. Prepare for anything. You know what I mean? Because you don't know what's going to be around the corner. You don't know what the particular challenge is going to be. You don't know if you're going to come across two different gangs and who maybe have some type of deep issue that, you know, hey, your involvement and your presence could bring to resolution. You know, you never know what the situation is. So I would really suggest just always being prepared, always being on point, always being vigilant. They say to be aware is to be alive. Be aware. You know what I mean? Check out, be aware of your environments. I tell you, I still cycle every day now because after that ride, my body is so keyed up, I can't just fall back into a lethargic lifestyle. You know what I mean? So I literally have to,
right.
I have to ride at least 30 to 40 miles a day. I find that it keeps my mind active. I find that I don't even have a taste in my mouth for alcohol like that. I might drink a beer every once in a while, but it actually brings me down. So, like,
right.
What I would say is find out what your circadian rhythm is. Find out what your rhythm is. What is your biorhythm? Where do you function in the most optimum way? But I would say definitely the biggest thing going into any situation is always be prepared and have no fear. Have no fear.
When you look at the trauma that that our community has experienced that affected not just the youth but even adults, people can oftentimes grow lethargic and complacent, and they don't see it as a problem. You know, when you look at the murder rate, the crime rate, the aggression in our community, that we've accepted as just part of our community. So when we say we solution focused, but first we have to identify a problem. So offhand, what would you see as some of the challenges that our community is faced with and that we need to begin to do some critical thinking around?
Sure. Negativity towards each other. The popular phrase of haters, of people, instead of celebrating each other, having something derogatory or something that brings the other person down. Spending too much time worrying about each other as opposed to focus on what your personal goals are so you can advance your life. But I really have to say, though, the biggest thing I see is this criticism towards each other, towards people that they don't even know. I see that every day, you know. Who do you think they are? Or, like, I was riding down the street today, for example, right? Just today. And dude was like, ha, ha, she can't even ride. I hope you don't fall in the snow. Now, I could have kept going. I could have ignored it, right? But I didn't because the kid was maybe 16, 17. And so he was like, ah. I'm like, I stop in the middle of the street, and I ride back over. It's about 4 of them. So they know it's no problem. I'm not worried about them. I'm not scared of anything. I'm like, right. You know what, guys? If I was any other type of guy and you said that to me, you don't know how I could respond. Now, that's not really the wise thing for you to do. You don't know me. Now, I'm sure you're having a good time. This is me dialoguing and engaging with these young kids. I'm sure it was funny to you for you to say that, and that's fine. But you don't know who you're saying these things to. I could be a type of person, I could have had a day that I didn't want to hear anything. I could have turned around and it could have been a whole different scenario. Now, I understand you're young and you're having fun, but you should be more wise about the words that come out of your mouth because that's not wise. You see what I'm saying?
How did they be?
And so they were quiet. They were all as quiet as mice. Because I didn't come at them. See, you got to understand, I've been trained in conflict resolution. So I won't just jump in any situation without assessing it first. But at the same time, we have a right. Everybody's a free man or free woman. We have a right to make sure that our environments are as we see fit, within right and within justice. And so what I was merely doing was educating him on the fact that the next person might react a totally different way. It could cause him harm. You see what I'm saying? So regardless of if he was a gangbanger or not, he could do nothing against the fact that I was merely trying to educate him to help him protect himself. See what I'm saying? While at the same time letting it be known that I don't tolerate that type of nonsense, and for him to watch his mouth. You see what I'm saying? So
right.
That's what critical thinking is about, is being able to educate each other without it escalating into a fight. You see what I'm saying? So it's learning how to deal with each other, learning that situations could be difficult or challenging, but we have a choice on how we react to them. We can let our emotions take the lead, and we already know what happens when you let your emotions lead. You wind up having to apologize or clean up some type of mess. Or you could put it in its proper context and deal with it as a higher intelligence being. You see what I'm saying? And put
right.
yourself into a whole other state of existence. And then after I said that, out of nowhere, 4 or 5 other dudes came up. And, it was their little gang or whatever. And it's me and about 4 or 5 other guys. And I know who my father is, and I know where my peace is at. And I know that my life is not my own. So I think people need to also be aware of the fact that fear is a disease, and if you give power to that disease, it will grow and it will take over every aspect of your life. You will find every reason to be afraid.
Right. You came from, just as you reported that scenario to us, you came from a place of true concern and a place of love. And I think that love in itself is a spiritual essence that has the ability to cause a situation to turn in a different way. With that energy, and I think there's an impact that has been made within the community. Yeah, it's like you gave them another thread that ties our community closer back together. So So when we looked at as we kick off these 5 days, we started with spiritual leadership in the community, because the community being the foundation from which all of the other things come forth, our relationships, which grows in the family, businesses that come forth. So I'm believing that this conversation will be carried over in the nights to come. When we think of this conversation, was there any particular thing that, as you perhaps meditated on this conversation tonight, that you kind of wanted to share with us beyond the questions that I've asked?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you, Greg. You've been doing a phenomenal job digging into it. I'm a pretty verbose guy, so.
So what's next for you?
What's next for me is 10,000 miles, brother. I got to ride. I'm doing 10,000 miles total on the cycle of peace. I'm not going to stop until I continue to see numbers diminish as far as youth violence is concerned, until I start seeing that people actually will engage each other in intelligent dialogue as opposed to screaming at each other. And I really want to see a change in my immediate environment. So the way I want to initiate it is riding my bike. I'm going to human power myself to a place of existence that I care to see. And like I say, right now I'm not saying that. So I'm an all conditioned rider. I don't care about snow. I don't care about 0 degrees. Nothing affects me anymore. And so I wish when people see me or they hear about this story, they don't ask me any more cliche questions about, isn't it cold, or you're wet, or you see what I'm saying? Like, let's start raising our level of thought, is what I ask, because it's coming from the children as well as the adults. And honestly, I don't have the patience to answer those type of questions anymore. What I would ask them is, aren't you tired of the news? Aren't you tired of your child at speaking ignorantly and not respecting you? Aren't you tired of your community crumbling around you and disintegrating in front of your very eyes while you worry about your Mercedes-Benz payment that depreciated in value the minute you drove it off the car lot? Aren't you concerned about your neighborhood having 4 boarded up houses instead of focusing on how to rebuild that neighborhood that's crumbling? You worried about the new shoes you just got? You know what I mean? So But you see, I don't want to crush people like that. You see, so it's easier for me to just get on my bike and just ride. See, because like I spend a lot of energy promoting liquor and promoting strong liquor, and the spirit just said, it's just you got to transition, man. That stuff that's bad. That's strong medicine. That's some strong fire water. And so now I choose instead of go ahead.
Is that your balance to this destruction of perhaps how bad choices and how that's affecting our community? And so this is the offset, that piece. So how does that play out?
Exactly. That's exactly what. So I say all that to say those are my next steps. I'm going to ride the 10,000 miles. I'm going to document every bit of the trek. I'm going to stop in different communities that I visit and come across. I'm going to talk to the people and find out what they're doing in different markets. I mean, you asked that question earlier on, so I think it's important that we find out, what is going on in different areas across the country. What's going on in Miami. I'm going to be spending a lot of time in Atlanta and other parts of the country as well. So, I'll be spending the next several years, really, really digging into this and really trying to seek real solutions, and not just dialogue, but real action behind the solution.
Are there any organizations within our community locally that you see getting involved with this endeavor? I see that
Absolutely.
you're involved with the Metropolitan Board of Chicago Urban League.
Yes, absolutely. The Urban League is doing a lot of good work, especially the Metropolitan Board is the youth arm of the organization. They have direct access to a lot of the entities that, need to be held accountable and responsible for a lot of this activity that we discuss. So, we're definitely working and molding and building programming around that. Chicago Public Schools, I see a lot of activity around that. They need more of our support because they do need to have an elected school board.
If youth want to get involved with you, if the youth or volunteer adults want to get involved, is there a number that they can reach you at?
Absolutely. Let's see. I'll give my email address because that'd be the easiest way.
You can give it out, and we'll post it on the site also.
Sure, absolutely. My email address is NW, N is in Nicoh, W is in Wilburn, 11637 @gmail.com. And that's my direct personal email. And other than that, we also have the fan page on Facebook, The Cycle of Peace. Also, there's a documentary that we're putting together around this whole topic we've discussed. We've been filming since at the beginning of the year, all the different programs from Inglewood to Lawndale to Grand Crossing, everything that's going on here in Chicago, we've been integrated into. So there will be a documentary coming out next year about all of this. And then, we're just going to continue the cycle. We're going to keep riding. We're going to ride till I get 10,000, and after 10,000, hey, I might keep pushing to 100,000. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things.
We're right at about 10 minutes left in the call. I wanted to make sure that those of you who are out there that's been listening in with us on tonight's Soul Connection, that if you are interested, got a question, to go ahead and press 1 on your dial, and we'll get that question answered before the end of today's program. Again, also, if you're interested in donating to Cycle of Peace, you can go to the Facebook page, and we have all the information listed out there on the Unite Your Soul Connection. So come on out to the Facebook page, join us there, and there's a plethora of information regarding this conversation we've had tonight and how you can, again, follow up if you want to be involved with the Cycle of Peace. Great. Great. Okay, so any wrapping, closing remarks you want to begin to make at this time, Nick?
Well, I just definitely like to thank, Master Force for even, bringing the Ignite Your Soul Connection, for producing this show. All the wonderful people behind it, Leela, Mood, all the support team. So I just really appreciate, even being considered to be interviewed for this wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, well, we have a question for you from Kim Taylor.
By the email, but I did want to just commend both of you for such a wonderful broadcast, because I think it needs to be heard. I, too, feel a strong sense of emergency for our young people. And when you were talking about, engaging in conversation with them when they're out of order, that's something that I've really tried to do, because I think if somebody don't say anything to them, they will continue doing what they do. And we can't continue to be afraid of speaking up to our children, because actually what we're doing is trying to save their lives.
Right.
So I want to thank you all as well as Master Force for this broadcast, because it's definitely needed, and hopefully we can get more things like this out here to the community, and people will start banding together and doing a little bit more than what we are doing.
Absolutely. Well, this is the start, Kim. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Kim, I'm glad you called in, and I hope that you'll be participating with us throughout the remainder of this week. We have some exciting topics to cover for the remainder of the week as we go into our winter solstice. So thanks for calling. Good. Okay, just want to go over a couple of things. We've had topics of spiritual leadership within business. On Wednesday, we'll have spiritual leadership within relationships with Jaquay and Timothy Glenn. Thursday, we'll be dealing with the family with Curtrice Scott. And then on Friday, we'll have our very own Shemsu-t. She'll be dealing with the topic of education. So we have a full schedule for the rest of this week, and I'm looking forward to the interaction, and not just the information that will be shared, but to hear from our community. So that's what binds us closer together. We're having a conversation for the next 4 days. So get involved. So when we look at wrapping up the conversation for tonight, I want to say I thank you very much, Nicoh, for what you shared with us. I want to commend you on the endeavor that you've taken on, this 10,000 miles. I look forward to perhaps going through some of the neighborhoods with you when it gets a little warmer. But make sure that everyone is aware, because everyone has to do their part. Again, I want to remind the listeners that you can come to Ignite Your Soul Connection fan page, and out there's just a lot of information in addition to how to get in contact with Nicoh, and in addition to that, the Cycle of Peace, which is the organization that is behind what he's doing here. So let's get involved. Let's make some donations, because it is important that we realize that it takes resources in order to bring to pass some of the things that we're trying to do, and you've started that. So that's key. Is there anything you would like to share before we bring this to a close?
It's true. Love someone, give somebody a hug, keep initiating random acts of kindness, because that would definitely help increase the whole vibration of it all. And I think if we implement a change of that magnitude here in Chicago, it'll be felt at a global scale. So keep loving each other.
We have the Kwanzaa days coming up here towards the end of the year. Are you involved anywhere within any Kwanzaa activities? That's a major community function.
You know what? I'm trying to decide where I'm going to be at now. I know I'll be in Atlanta over the next few weeks, spending some time with my son and trying to recharge, and then I have to go out west. So I'm still trying to get everything all wrapped up, and as far as travel is concerned. But if I am here, I will be there, whatever is relevant.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us this evening, Nicoh. On behalf of Master Force Incorporated, I thank you for making time in your schedule and to share with us the insight and your very insightfulness towards spiritual leadership as it pertains to our community. It's been quite a pleasure for me to be part of this listening-ship tonight and interacting with you. I invite the rest of you to please be sure to join in with us tomorrow when we will talk with Kevon Ware from IMAX Consultants on the topic of spiritual leadership and business. And be sure to share and tell your friends about us. Thank you very much, Master Force, for we are ascending.